Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, September 14th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about, you guessed it, the New York City mayoral race. Now, I know you're probably tired of hearing me talk about the New York City race, a race that has been surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, knowing the dynamics of the race, one that has received actually quite little, I think, national attention as of late. I think there's been a much bigger focus on a variety of other elections, especially even on this channel, talking about Virginia, talking about New Jersey. But I do believe that this is a very, very important election that I do think serves as a bit of a microcosm of where the National Democratic Party is, especially with candidates like Zohran Mamdani. Now, looking at this most recent op-ed from Kathy Hochul, quote, "Why I am endorsing Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral race," is one that I do think is really indicative of where the National Democratic Party is moving and trending towards in terms of backing their candidates in New York City, and maybe not even just National Democrats, but even more on a local level, why we are starting to see more and more Democrats really jump on to the Mamdani train in this race, and arguably why you're seeing a lot of senators, a lot of representatives come out and endorse Mamdani, and why there is this massive push from members of the traditional, Democratic Senate leadership and Senate Democratic caucus, and even on the House side too, we saw Chris Van Hollen publicly came out against Democratic leaders for the delay in endorsing Mamdani, because this race arguably is one that Democrats should have seen major endorsements for Mamdani in the race. There has been a huge narrative that has been pushed since the 2016 election about vote blue no matter who. But when it came down to the New York City mayoral race, it wasn't very clear that Democrats were on board with that. Now, the New York City primary was contested. Don't get me wrong. It was a very competitive race. Cuomo ended up coming up short. Mamdani had a huge upset victory and outperformed and outpaced all of the data that had been put before us before this New York City mayoral primary. But what it showed was that the data itself was wrong because the people they were talking to were not representative of what the actual electorate would look like. Mamdani turned out massive amounts of support of a variety of different Democrats, including Democrats that had not voted in a Democratic primary since 2012 or even ever, and a lot of his voters came from areas that traditionally had not even felt engaged or excited enough to vote in elections, and turnout skyrocketed across New York City in this mayoral primary. Now, Governor Kathy Hochul is the most recent Democrat to come out and endorse Mamdani in the New York City mayoral race, and I think, again, like I said, it is indicative of why, what we have been seeing here, especially the criticisms from Van Hollen. All this hostility that seemingly has been put up against Mamdani by a lot of these Democrats has now been directly called out by Senator Chris Van Hollen from my home state of Maryland, but also now you are finding that other Democrats are following suit in endorsing Mamdani. Now, Kathy Hochul has had, months on end to make this endorsement. She has been asked about it directly by a variety of different members of the press since that June primary. We saw that Hochul was the first person that people turned to say, are you going to endorse Mamdani? Why is she the first? Well, she's the governor of the state of New York. But then she decided that she was going to push it down the road, that she needed time to make an endorsement to assess her options in the race. But what we know from this race is that her take is that Mamdani is the right person to meet this moment in New York City, push back against Donald Trump, and lead the city in the right direction. She, as governor of New York, has come around to say, I am endorsing Mamdani, and I arguably expect that this will be the beginning of a snowball effect that will pile on endorsement after endorsement after endorsement that will remove a lot of the oxygen from some of those Democrats that might have been holding out for Cuomo or Adams because they were upset with the way the Democratic primary went. And they saw these other Democrats here who would not come out with full-throated endorsements of Mamdani as a permission structure to say, okay, I don't need to vote for him because even the National Democrats are not on board. So maybe he's not the right person for the moment, but very clearly, that seems to be crumbling down. Hakeem Jeffries' office also put out a statement in response to Chris Van Hollen that also responded by criticizing Van Hollen, but the point of their statement was that Leader Jeffries will come out with an endorsement well before the November 4th election. But they actually met Mamdani and Jeffries back in July of 2025, but an endorsement wasn't given. And so on routine, Jeffries is asked constantly, why won't you endorse Mamdani? Why won't you endorse Mamdani? Why won't you endorse Mamdani? And it looks like, with that statement in response to Van Hollen, coupled with the fact that Kathy Hochul is jumping on board, is that Democrats are jumping on the Mamdani train because it is either going without them or with them. And what they are seeing is that there is clear energy in New York City, and this is not to say that New York City's politics and policies work on the national level, but there absolutely is reason to believe that Mamdani has tapped into something different about the base of the New York City Democratic Party. Take him and throw him to another city, maybe it doesn't work. But clearly there were a lot of voters in this Dem primary and in this upcoming general that are getting out and voting for Mamdani because they like his style of governance, they like his style of campaigning, and they believe him to be a genuine and passionate figure in politics when many people have been unable to offer that for decades on end. And now the governor not only making an endorsement, I think this is a way bigger thing than just making a slight statement to the press. Oh, I guess he's the Democratic nominee. We saw that a bit with Councilwoman Adrienne Adams, who said, well, yeah, he's the Democratic primary winner. I'm going to endorse him. This is a very public endorsement, backing behind every single statement Kathy Hochul is making, saying that she thinks that Mamdani is the right person to go, saying that they've had their disagreements, but in their conversations, she heard of a leader who shares her commitment to New York, where children can grow up safe in their neighborhoods and where opportunity is within reach for every family. She wrote an entire op-ed as to why she is endorsing him and is backing it publicly. Very different than some of these offhand endorsements that we've seen, not just necessarily from Mamdani, but what we've seen across the country in many races where clearly the Democratic base and the Democratic establishment figures do not want to jump on top of the race and do not want to endorse the eventual Democratic nominee. But in this race, that's what Kathy Hochul was doing. She is endorsing Mamdani with the full weight of her words and doing so in a very public fashion. And I think it shows that people are reading the writing on the wall. If the Boston mayoral primary was indicative of anything that we might see this cycle in these major cities that are having these elections, when the opposition is someone who paints themselves as more of a centrist and more of a middle-of-the-ground person, cities and urban areas are some of the most democratic parts of the nation. Again, never making the argument that the policy points or the campaign strategy one-to-one makes sense everywhere. But keep in mind the demographics of New York City. Democrats outnumber Republicans by a margin of 6-1 in voter registration in New York City. And getting back to that point in the city of Boston, a big reason why Michelle Wu won was because she was seen as someone who was more of a fighter, pushing back against Donald Trump, and not someone who would capitulate to the president of the United States, and not someone who was middle of the road, who would not have any substantive or progressive policy passing in their city council and would not implement them if it came to the mayor's desk if they were elected. And so Michelle Wu won re-election in that early primary. The November is the actual general election, but her biggest opponent just dropped out of the race. Why? Because she won the preliminary round by over 50 points. It is those moments that really expose that in a lot of these areas, Mamdani included, you are going to find that some of these candidates will do better than you expect them to. And Republicans and Democrats and independents in New York City and I think across the country have come to a very clear realization that Mamdani is on track for victory. And so you either join him or you're against him. And that is the way this race goes. Now, Mamdani has arguably been quite a team trooper about not receiving many major endorsements. When asked about it constantly, he really does deflect and does not like to, go in deep on these Democrats that have not come out and endorsed him, because I don't think it actually does much further than pull away some of that support from Cuomo and Adams. But Mamdani, with or without an endorsement from Kathy Hochul and with and without an endorsement from Hakeem Jeffries, would still win this New York City mayoral race. Arguably, as someone who's about to be elected, mayor of the largest city in the country, a city with a population larger than 38 states across the United States, we are finding ourselves at a point where, sorry, my Siri decided to pop up in this case, but we are at a point where we're looking at this, and Mamdani is providing a very clear pathway forward for him in this mayoral race, and all the Democrats, Republicans included, Donald Trump included, Kathy Hochul included, see that pathway is emerging and becoming a lot more difficult to obstruct. And now it very much seems like a near guarantee that Mamdani is mayor, and they want to jump on that train. Looking at those who have come out and endorsed him, first of all, in the Democratic primary, if you actually look at the endorsements Mamdani received, it honestly wasn't that many. A lot of these, Adrian Adams received a lot of endorsements from Congress people across the country, right? Even Michael Blake, you're going to find endorsements. Cuomo received an endorsement from a multitude of U.S. representatives, Bill Clinton, a lot of top names, governors, a huge, huge set of people in this city. Mamdani's endorsements were pretty contained. Former Secretary of Labor from Bill Clinton's administration, one U.S. Senator being Bernie Sanders, and members of the squad. Outside of that, you weren't really seeing much else. But in the general election, this is when you really see the Democrats jump on board, and Kathy Hochul is the most recent Democrat to do so. Take a look at this race. Mamdani receiving major endorsements, Chris Van Hollen, Elizabeth Warren, a lot of Congress people, a big set of names, Jamie Raskin, right? Joe Walsh, who was a Republican in Congress, endorsing Mamdani in this race. The lieutenant governor of New York, and now the governor. The Attorney General had endorsed in the primary as a third choice, but primary choice now, the Attorney General of Minnesota, a lot of top names, not only in New York City, but across this country, and the list goes on and on and on. Multitude of state senators and state assemblymen, city council members, organizations, unions, everyone. Huge, huge names endorsing Mamdani in this election. Why? Because they read the writing on the wall that Mamdani, on his pathway to victory, they would like to be on it with him. They would like to be on that winning train in this election. And so thinking about what we are expecting to see, my honest answer is that I think within the next week or two, Jeffries endorses Mamdani. I think within the next week or two, we start to see a lot of top Democrats come out and say Mamdani is the choice. Because if he wins without them, that will be evidence in itself that he never needed them in this primary or in this general election. That he did not need the institutional support the Democrats swear by and believe to be necessary in order to be successful in a general election. But Mamdani might throw that all out of the window, and they don't want that. And so in this election, I think that Hochul is the first example of somewhat a major name who has long held out on an endorsement of Mamdani that is now reeling it in. And I think it will be very interesting to see who moves first, who says next, because ultimately, they know, we know, Mamdani will be mayor of New York City. They can either be with him or against him. But as it stands right now, it doesn't seem much is stopping Mamdani in New York City. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.